Ladies and gentlemen, if you could take your seats, we're going to get going in about a minute. Thank you for joining us. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Please do come in and take a seat. We're going to get started. We have a lot to get through, a lot of exciting things, but as ever at these events, there's never enough time, so we're going to do our best to not kick off too late. My name is Tom Rivett-Carnac. I'm a founding partner at Global Optimism and a co-host of the podcast Outrage and Optimism, and we're going to be recording some of these panels for our podcast, so if you don't listen, they come out every day. Please do tune in. I co-host it with Christiana Figueres, who used to run the UNFCCC. So please do come in and take a seat. We're going to make a start in a minute. Thank you. Now, this is the high-level event on Beat the Heat. Extreme heat, as we all know, is one of the climate impacts that has the highest impact on people around the world. And the Secretary General recently issued a call for action on extreme heat, seeking to massively increase the availability of low-carbon cooling. In response to that, Beat the Heat is a collective effort to try to address the places where this is affecting us the most, namely in cities, and today marks the launch of the next phase of this work, the implementation drive, following the announcement of the collective effort in Bonn earlier this year. The objectives of this session include announcing the first cohort of countries and cities that are joining the initiative, and it's an honor for me to moderate this session with such distinguished speakers, mayors, CEOs, and others, all united to address one of the most challenging problems of our time. So, we are going to begin with an address from Her Excellency Marina Silva, the Minister of Environment for Brazil. So this is the last time I'm going to ask this. Everybody sit down and stop talking. Come on in. Okay. Close the door. You're going to hear from Marina Silva, one of the greatest leaders at this COP. So quiet, attention please. Marina Silva, Your Excellency, over to you. Would you like to sit here or over there? Yeah, perfect.
Boa tarde a todos, a todas. Bem, eu fiquei particularmente muito mobilizada para essa sessão de alto nível da COP30 sobre o combate ao calor, né, um mutirão contra o calor extremo. E o calor é um dos eventos extremos que a mudança do clima está causando. A gente sempre vê todos os demais eventos extremos, como enchentes, secas, incêndios, potencializados pela mudança do clima. E um desses problemas gravíssimos é o calor extremo. Então, o Brasil é um país extremamente vulnerável em diferentes regiões. Nós tivemos, no Rio de Janeiro, o ano passado, uma onda de calor extremo e que a sensação térmica chegou a quase uma média de temperatura de 60 graus de temperatura médias, em termos de sensação. Então, para se ver o quanto que isso é um problema para a saúde. E pensar que, para combater tudo isso, nós temos que ter uma série de medidas que estão dentro das 3 agendas. Da agenda de mitigação, porque isso é a causa do calor extremo, a agenda de adaptação, porque, como ele já está acontecendo, é preciso criar formas que sejam sinérgicas, sustentáveis, de combater o calor extremo, e a agenda de transformação, que eu diria é um processo mais demorado, mas que é estruturante para resolvermos o problema, ou pelo menos tentarmos resolver esse problema. Eu vivi uma experiência que me tocou muito profundamente alguns anos atrás. Eu estava no aeroporto em Manaus e uma pessoa cadeirante, ela se aproximou para pedir para fazermos uma fotografia. Como eu estava bem atrasada, eu pedi para essa pessoa que nós passássemos o detector de metal primeiro, que depois nós iríamos fazer a fotografia. E ela disse, mas eu não vou viajar, eu fico o dia todo aqui, porque eu sou cadeirante, a minha casa e o meu bairro é muito quente, então a minha esposa todo dia me traz, me deixa aqui no aeroporto, ela traz a minha comida e quando ela volta do trabalho, eu acho que ela trabalhava em uma casa com serviços domésticos, aí ela me leva. E aquilo me tocou profundamente. Depois eu tive acesso a dados que mostram que aqui no Brasil nós temos cerca de 20 milhões de crianças e adolescentes que estudam em escolas que não estão adaptadas, que não estão climatizadas. E eu e o ministro da Educação, o ministro da Saúde, estamos discutindo como fazer um programa para acelerar processos de adaptação nas escolas. Nós temos várias atividades, temos um programa chamado Cidades Verdes e Resilientes, nós temos um outro programa chamado Adapta a Cidade, que cria mecanismos, procedimentos para como as cidades podem se adaptar, mas a climatização não pode ser pensada só do ponto de vista de tecnologias, eu diria, tradicionais. Ela tem que ser pensada com tecnologias mais modernas, que tenham teste de muitos anos, com experiência muito larga, como é, por exemplo, os processos de arborização. São tecnologias testadas durante milhões de anos que comprovam que quando você tem uma escola arborizada, um hospital arborizado adequadamente, isso já diminui a temperatura, o microclima. As ondas de calor, segundo os dados que temos, estão ceifando cerca de 500 mil vidas por ano. Esse dado ele é subnotificado. A maioria das pessoas que perdem suas vidas em função do calor extremo, isso não é computado como sendo em função da onda de calor. Geralmente, a criança ela é notificada, se vai a óbito, que perdeu a vida em função de um processo de desidratação. A mesma coisa uma pessoa idosa, ou se ela tem o agravamento de problemas cardíacos, de pressão alta. Tudo fica subnotificado, mas nós sabemos que as vítimas do calor extremo é incomparavelmente maior. Agora, não vamos pensar só em termos das pessoas. Temos que pensar também como isso afeta a biodiversidade, como isso afeta os sistemas produtivos, principalmente os sistemas alimentares. Eu conversava ainda há pouco, ontem, com uma pessoa aqui do estado do Pará, que o ano passado, em que tivemos por 12 meses a temperatura acima de 1,5, ele disse, as castanheiras, que são árvores muito grandes, que dão uma amêndoa saborosa, ele disse, elas não produziram muito, porque elas floriram, mas o fruto murchou ainda muito novinho, muito tenro. Então, nós vamos precisar trabalhar todos os processos possíveis de adaptação. Mas o importante é que temos que combater o mal pela raiz. E a gente sabe que o que causa tudo isso, e termino com essas palavras, é a emissão de CO2 em função do uso de combustível fóssil. Por isso que toda essa agenda que foi aprovada na COP28, de triplicar renovável, duplicar a eficiência energética e fazer a transição para longe de combustível fóssil, ou para o fim de combustível fóssil, como eu prefiro dizer, é fundamental. Ao mesmo tempo que fazer a transição para o fim do desmatamento. O Brasil já tem o compromisso de zerar desmatamento até 2030 e vamos perseguir essa meta. Já conseguimos uma redução de 50% na Amazônia nos últimos 3 anos, conseguimos de 32% em todo o país, evitamos lançar 700 milhões de toneladas de CO2 na atmosfera. E sabemos que isso é a raiz. E eu fiquei muito feliz porque o presidente Lula, na cúpula e ontem na abertura, ele disse claramente, em que pesem nossas contradições e desafios, nós temos que fazer um mapa do caminho para uma transição justa e planejada para o fim do uso de combustível fóssil, para o fim do desmatamento e para viabilizar os necessários meios de implementação. O mundo está vivendo um dos maiores, em que acaba de chegar, um dos maiores desafios que a humanidade já teve que enfrentar. E como é um extremo que pode destruir não apenas a nossa vida, mas destruir as condições em que a vida nos foi dada, eu não posso deixar de acreditar que nós haveremos de encontrar respostas, seja na adaptação, na mitigação e na transformação do modelo insustentável de desenvolvimento que nos trouxe a essa situação, com o compromisso de que os mais vulneráveis são os que pagam os maiores preços, seja quando acontece um tornado, como aconteceu agora no meu país, lá no estado do Paraná, seja em função das ondas de calor. Muito obrigada.
Minister Silva, thank you so much for those remarks and for the role that you have played for so long championing people in this conversation. Can I actually invite you to join me on the stage here, if that's all right? Thank you so much, Minister. Now, to officially open this event, we are honored to have with us the Executive Director of UNEP, who have done so much to drive forward the Global Cooling Pledge and now beat the heat. So please join me in welcoming Inga Anderson.
Well, thank you very, very much. And let me begin by recognizing this absolutely amazing lady, a force of nature herself, and a strong leader on the world stage who speaks truths and who reminds us all of the responsibility that we hold. Madam Minister, dear Marina, we are in your debt. And it is a great honor for me to be here in Brazil. And thank you for taking us to Belém. And we are very happy to be here. You know, we know what it is to live in the Global South. We have the privilege of being based in Nairobi. And it is important that the world of COPs understand how other people live. Not everybody lives in fancy cities with fancy infrastructure, but here we are at the very edge of the tropical forest, where water meets forests, and a vibrant city. Thank you, Madam Minister. Now, warm welcome to the launch of the Beat the Heat de Mutirão, Contra, Calor, Extremo. I've been working on that, which is the implementation drive, an initiative from the COP30 Presidency and the UNEP-led Cool Coalition. Frankly, this is where all the cool people hang out. So my thanks go to Brazil and to the COP presidency for this important partnership, which aims to translate the global cooling pledge into real local action and deliver on the United Nations Secretary General's call on extreme heat. Under the global cooling pledge, we're proud that 72 countries are already collaborating on reducing cooling-related emissions by over 60% by 2040, while growing access to sustainable cooling for all. We heard this morning that there are states in this beautiful country where only 3% of the schools have access to cooling. And we understand that you learn better, obviously, when you are not sitting as a little fidgety kids and getting very hot, but where you can actually focus on the learning. So reaching the targets is crucial because extreme heat is the clearest signal of a climate crisis. Extreme heat is already deadly. It causes around 500,000 deaths a year, and it will unfortunately get worse. The national determined contributions have not done enough to lower the warming predictions where we want them to be. Our emissions gap report speaks to the fact that right now the current policies will take us to 2.8 degrees. With the NDCs, we're looking at 2.4 to 2.6 degrees, and frankly, we are also looking at an overshoot. That means a sustained over 1.5 over a 10-year period. We can see this now. However, it is entirely in our hand to bend that curve and bend it faster, because every digit of a degree matters. And so, cities are the ones that suffer first from the heat waves, and we know that the urban heat islands can impact and affect and drive local temperatures up 10 degrees. On Sunday, I had the privilege of visiting the botanical garden here in beautiful Belém, and also a project that is in a national park that UNEP is proud to collaborate with. And you just walk out from the city and into the botanical garden, 4 degrees less. You walk into the park with a nice breeze from the ocean and from the river, 5 degrees less. The point here is that this ambient cooling is relevant, and we see that in the cities we get much more heat. And who is most exposed? Not those who live with fancy gardens and lovely trees in their compounds. Who is exposed are the poor people who may not have gardens, who may not have the ambient cooling opportunities, and therefore also often will live in precarious settings and might therefore be very exposed when other climate-related events happen, such as storms or floods. And that is why it is so important that the 160 cities from Rio de Janeiro to Chennai to Nairobi, as well as 80 partners who are with us here today, have joined the Beat the Heat alongside the Global Cooling Pledge country signatures. Because, friends, we cannot air conditioning our way out of this heat crisis. That is clear. Yet, access to cooling saves lives and determines whether economies, schools, hospitals, factories, etc., function at top level for the economy and for well-being of people. But if we deliver unsustainably cooling, then we will drive greenhouse gas emissions more, inequality, and potential in many countries, grid collapse. Yes?
Sorry, I'm hearing people can't always hear you, so I think the microphone's really sound.
Okay, I'm going to speak right into the microphone. My apologies for that. So the challenge is really, how can we expand affordable, efficient cooling for adaptation while cutting the energy and the carbon footprint for mitigation? Now, the good news is that this is entirely doable. It's in our grasp. The Global Cooling Watch report that we released today sets a sustainable cooling pathways. Fans first. The fans alone, followed by maybe water-based cooling and nature-based cooling, and when needed, air conditioning, can really cut up to 64% of our greenhouse gas emissions that are related to cooling. So there are some very real answers. And frankly, as someone who lived in Sudan in the 1980s, and this will date me, where all the cooling was water over mat with the air blowing through, and it worked quite fine. And the point is that there are simpler ways than highly inefficient and costly air conditioning. So through Beat the Heat, we at UNEP and many partners present here will work, and of course under the leadership of the presidency, will work to support cities and regions to deliver on the pathway by assessing heat risks, by figuring out how we can increase green covers or cool roofs, and integrating that into urban planning. We'll also support by expanding nature-based and passive cooling options, as I mentioned, and where appropriate and helpful, let's talk about how we can use public procurement to shift the markets towards efficient, low global warming potential cooling technologies. Now, at UNEP, cooling is one of our long-term work areas over decades. So we do have a lot of experience in this place, together with many other partners. And so we are happy to see backing from countries like Switzerland and Denmark and Climate Works, etc., to make this job done. It's very interesting because once you begin that discussion, for example, in India, India is now redesigning a 1.5 billion national disaster mitigation fund to ensure that that fund also allocates funding for passive cooling. Look, our ancestors knew how to build, and I'm sure that in this country, many of the indigenous communities still know how to build, to work with nature, not against it. Don't make a fort out of concrete. Build it with breeze blocks and work with the natural breezes. Ensure that you have the cooling on your side in your very architecture. Let's rediscover some of that. That's part of what we have to do. We can learn from those who went before us, from those who have the indigenous knowledge and insights. So friends, let us recognize that cooling, from sustainable air conditioning and refrigeration to every tree in our cities, is essential infrastructure, alongside water, energy, and sanitation. Let's follow the sustainable cooling pathway. Let's deliver on the global cooling pledge, and let's beat the heat together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those remarks. I mean, could not be a more timely and necessary initiative as was set out. Executive Director, if I could invite you to go on the stage now, we would like to have, I have a question, is Anna Tony in the room? Okay, she is the woman probably in this building who is needed in most places at once, so we won't hold it against her, but she will be here later. But if I could invite Minister Marina Silva and Inga Anderson to come to the front of the stage, the intention here is to get a photograph of you at the launch. So the two of you together, if you will. Yeah. Yeah, to the front of the stage. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I think on the stage, if you would. Yeah.
Yeah, but from here we get the background.
You can get it there, can't you? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much, Minister. Great. Okay, so we are now going to begin to move on to our keynote address, Humanity in the Heat. So let me introduce our first distinguished speaker, a leading climate scientist and co-chair of the IPCC Working Group 2, and professor at Singapore Management University, Dr. Winston Chow. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, friends, old and new. I come here to speak in my capacity as both co-chair of Working Group 2 of the IPCC, and I'm very excited to see this report. Also contributed a little bit, and you'll see the foreword is co-authored by me. I'm very happy to see that. And also in my research role as a professor of urban climate, where I've studied a lot and worked a lot in terms of understanding the science behind urban heat, and critically, what can we do to adapt, reduce the risks, as well as the concurrent emissions that occur in how we deal with heat. So a lot of these themes resonate with the report that's being released today, so I'm very happy to see that. So, ladies and gentlemen, the science that we assess could not be clearer. The planet is heating faster than many human and natural systems can adapt to. What we found in the IPCC is that extreme heat events are indeed becoming more frequent, more intense, and more deadly. Heat is now the silent emergency of our time. It kills more people each year than any other climate-related hazard. It undermines productivity and disrupts the energy and food systems that we rely on. as the IPCC chair, Sir Jim Ski, reminded us yesterday. Based on the evidence in the most recent IPCC reports, it is now almost inevitable that 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming will be exceeded in the near term. Without stronger action, therefore, the risks that we face in our cities will only intensify. But their impacts are not evenly felt. Those without reliable shelter, those without access to electricity or affordable cooling already bear the brunt. In short, the heat crisis is also a justice crisis. To meet it, we must recognize that cooling is essential infrastructure, as the report says. It as fundamental as water, as fundamental as energy and sanitation. Safe and affordable access to cooling is a precondition for health, is a precondition for education and economic opportunity and development in a warming world. Yet we cannot, as much as I would like to, we cannot air condition our way out of this crisis using inefficient fossil fuel-based systems. To do so, we need to consider that adaptation and mitigation are inseparable, and the way that we cool mustn't heat the planet further. This new report, therefore, points us towards a sustainable cooling pathway, one that significantly slashes future emissions by 2050, one that expands access to affordable cooling and unlocks economic benefits worth trillions through reduced energy costs as well as averted costs of inaction. This pathway combines proven technologies and innovative approaches. That's very appealing. It looks into passive cooling, including nature-based solutions through green and blue spaces. It looks into low-energy solutions such as fans, evaporative coolers, hybrid air conditioning, and solar off-grid systems. It looks into maximizing high-efficiency cooling equipment, and also, critically, a rapid phase-down of hydrofluorocarbons, which are some of the most powerful greenhouse gases on Earth. Crucially, this pathway highlights equity. Adopting passive and low-energy cooling reduces heat risk for over 800 million of the world's poorest households by 2050. Those least able to own or operate air conditioning, as well as those most exposed to extreme heat that we face as we go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. The report's findings are consistent with the IPCC's sixth assessment report and will also inform the forthcoming special report on climate change and cities that is due in 2027. But we do not need to wait for this. The evidence already shows what's at stake, as well as what's possible if we move faster and we move more decisively. Policies that follow the global cooling pledge are emerging across nations and cities. That's very heartening. Yet, we must move further. From pilots to scale, from emergency responses to thinking about proactive, multi-level governance. Integrating extreme heat and sustainable cooling into national adaptation plans, local resilience strategies, and investment pipelines will determine how well we protect people as well as to prosper in a hotter world. Excellencies, delegates, friends, this is the moment for coordinated action across ministries, across borders, across generations, so as to ensure that cooling the planet means protecting more people and not polluting the air. So when we cool sustainably, we save lives, we power economies, and we build the resilience that endures and is needed at this time and at this COP. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chow. I mean, it's so important to be reminded that there is no way to avoid the necessity of these pathways given where we are. And we need to find a way to move forward without air conditioning our way out of this crisis, as you've said so clearly. Now we're going to move to our first panel. And our first panel is going to be on adapting cities to extreme heat and reducing emissions. So I'd like to invite the panelists to please join me on stage. His Excellency Lieutenant General Bashir Mohammed Jama, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change for Somalia. Mrs. Jane Lomax-Smith, the Lord Mayor of Adelaide, Australia, and Mr. Evandro Leitão, the Mayor of Fortaleza, Brazil. Fantastic. So please grab a microphone. There should be one near to you. I've got another one here if you need it, Minister. Thank you. Excellent. So, Minister, I would like to start with you. Financing and technical capacity are often major challenges that we all face. How will Somalia's participation in Beat the Heat implementation drive help accelerate national resilience and cooling efforts?
Thank you. And, good afternoon to everyone. To start with, for Somalia, sustainable cooling is not a luxury. It is essential to safeguard food systems, health, and livelihoods. Secondly, Somalia is among the world's most climate vulnerable countries, having faced its worst drought in 40 years in 2023, followed by devastating floods that displaced over 1.4 million people and deepened food security. Furthermore, rapid unplanned expansion in urban centers has amplified heat island effects with inadequate housing and limited vegetation, increasing health risks, especially in displacement camps and informal settlements. Cooling is now included in our NDC 3.0, reflecting our commitment to the global cooling pledge. By engaging all stakeholders in NDC planning, we ensure that cooling is recognized as a key adaptation and mitigation measure, critical for reducing our food loss, protecting public health, and achieving our climate goals. Our first national cooling action plan, which we are collaborating with UNEP and Cool Coalition, will engage passive cooling and cold chain innovations to strengthen resilience and enable sustainable growth in vulnerable communities. For passive cooling, through better design, materials, and nature-based approaches, offers a proven cost-effective solution to reduce indoor heat, lower energy needs from cooling, and improve living conditions, particularly for displaced affected communities in urban and pre-urban areas. By joining Be the Heat, we aim to protect communities, cities, and critical sectors like livestock from an intensifying heat and climate stress. We count on the Bee Cooling Program to support Somalia achieve its goal, as it will provide an integrated response to extreme heat, protecting lives, improving shelter conditions for displacement-affected communities, while advancing Somalia's NDC 3.0 commitment.
Fantastic. Minister, thank you so much. Excellently. And so good to hear that you making it so clear. This is a necessity. This is not a luxury. This is what is now needed. Lord Mayor, I'd love to come to you. Adelaide, of course, is a hot, dry city. I'm sure you are putting in place all kinds of measures to protect your population. I'd love to hear what you're doing and what you're learning.
Well, it would come as no surprise to people in the room to know that Australia is very hot. And we have learned over decades to adapt to hot weather, but things have changed dramatically. Perhaps in the last century, we would get 1 or 2 days over 40 degrees centigrade each year. Now we get 8 or 9, and it's predicted that in the future this will double within the next 15 years. It seems a challenge to us because we in our state have gone a long way along the path to decarbonize our energy supply. Our transition is now at 75%. We have over 50% of our homes have rooftop solar. 40% of our power comes from wind. In fact, we're part of a program that gives away energy 3 hours each day because we have too much and we need to get rid of it. And that is an equity issue as much as anything else. But as a city, it has a profound impact. 85% of Australians live in cities. We have this fantasy that we're outback adventurers, but actually we live in urban environments, and 2/3 of us live in our large capital cities. So towns like Adelaide, which traditionally had a Mediterranean climate, are moving towards an arid climate, which of course impacts on market gardens and farms, but it makes our cities untenable into the future. And my intention is to future-proof my town because I understand that primarily this is a health issue. And we're driven by data. And across the city, we have diurnal heat maps where we can see which streets and which parts of our city never cool at night. So if you live in the leafy, green, affluent suburbs, you have trees in your garden and we have trees on the street. The poorer areas have fewer trees and it's 8 to 10 degrees hotter at night, which means you have an increased incidence of cardiac drama and disasters, and it's not just, it's morbidity and mortality that's affected. So we regard this as a social justice issue. We use our data to work out where to plant trees. And that sounds really easy. It's easy to plant a tree, but not on a street. Not on a street in Australia. It can cost $25,000 to plant a single tree because we have underground cables and wires. It's extremely difficult. The other challenge for us is to work out what sort of trees to plant because the trees we used to plant in the last century don't survive so well in 10 degrees hotter. Australians know that gum trees, eucalypts, are pretty dangerous to sit under and camp, never camp under a eucalypt tree. Australians know that. We never plant eucalypts on our streets because they do tend to drop branches. But now we're finding our other deciduous trees are dropping branches as well because they don't survive in the heat. This is a major problem because our target is to have 40% canopy cover in the next 10 years in our streets of Adelaide, which will keep the whole town cool. The other issue for us is the managing our outdoor workers, having research into how they're stressed by hot weather. We obviously have protocols for sports and major events. We have programs to retrofit buildings to improve their heat conservation. And we're very keen to avoid demolishing buildings, and we refit older buildings because we know that we can work on them to get their heritage up to scratch and produce housing. All of those things can go ahead, but we also acknowledge that there's a major social impact as well. Part of our data collection is to work out how far you can walk on a hot day. And we had a day in 2019, in January, when the temperature in our city was 47.7 degrees centigrade. That is really debilitating. You cannot walk to the shops, the library, any community amenities. And we have a program that will show how far you can walk as the temperature rises. And that allows us to plan safe routes, but also install more community amenity. The other issue is to recognize the economic impact. And everyone understands that if you have bushfires and floods, it affects the economy. But actually extreme heat does as well. Nobody will walk to the shops when it's over 40 degrees. And we know that our retail will suffer. This is really important because one of the things I've been keen to do is to have a social license for very expensive tree planting. And tree planting is so dear and takes so much of our ratepayers' money. I have worked with our property owners, our business owners, and our retail sector, and they understand I'm not just planting trees to be socially just and for equity. We're planting trees to maintain their businesses and their prosperity. And I think getting that social license allows us to spend money on the things that are important. And I should recognize that with the topic of Mutirão, this is something we all need to work on. Whatever we do about an energy transition, adaptation, remediation, and viability of our city depends on what municipalities do. It's not possible for nations to deal with every city, but we have boots on the ground, we employ staff, we have shovels at the ready. We just sometimes need some financial support as well. And I think that's common in all municipalities. Let's work together.
Mayor, Lord Mayor, thank you so much. And as you say, hearing the examples of like really on the ground, $25,000 to plant a tree, I mean, when you say it, you can see the dynamics that go into it, but people aren't aware of the complexity of these things. I would love to come to you now, please, Mayor. I know Fortaleza has been trying to deal with these issues, in particular focusing on those nature-based solutions. Maybe you could share a little bit about your experience.
Alô, alô. Muito boa tarde a todos e a todas. Fortaleza faz parte de uma das unidades da federação do nosso país. O Brasil, com dimensões continentais, com suas contradições, com mais de 200 milhões de pessoas que moram em nosso país. E Fortaleza está nessa perspectiva de uma dessas unidades, com diversos biomas que o nosso país tem, e Fortaleza, no semiárido nordestino, uma capital com 2.575.000 pessoas morando, a quarta maior capital do país, também com suas contradições, desigualdades sociais. E por que eu estou falando isso tudo? Eu estou falando porque não se faz o enfrentamento da crise climática se não for fazendo justiça social. E vice-versa. Não existe justiça social sem o enfrentamento também da crise climática. Nós, Fortaleza, tem aproximadamente 45% da sua população cadastrada em programas sociais. Uma forte dependência do governo, tanto federal, estadual como municipal. E tudo isso, toda essa conjuntura, quando nós assumimos a prefeitura, agora dia 1º de janeiro de 2025, nós encontramos uma cidade com diversos problemas, com diversas situações a enfrentar. E nós criamos um programa, logo nos primeiros 3 meses do nosso mandato, chamado Fortaleza Inclusiva. Esse programa, que contempla 8 eixos da nossa cidade, aliás, da nossa cidade não, da humanidade como um todo, e um deles, o 7º eixo, é justiça climática. E eu fiz esse breve contexto, justamente para dizer que esse enfrentamento à crise climática, ele perpassa também pela justiça social, com ações intersetoriais, com ações na área da saúde, com ações na área da educação, com ações na área da infraestrutura. Nós, enquanto cidade, enquanto governo municipal, é importante que se diga algumas das nossas ações que nós implementamos. Nós, depois de 6 anos de atraso, a nossa capital, Fortaleza, está revisando o seu plano diretor. A última vez que foi revisto foi em 2009. Em 2019, 10 anos depois, era para ter sido revisto o plano diretor, o que não aconteceu. E nós agora estamos revendo o nosso plano diretor. Já está na Casa Legislativa, na Câmara Municipal de Fortaleza, para que os vereadores possam fazer as devidas avaliações. E a mensagem que nós enviamos para lá, depois de uma ampla discussão, uma gestão compartilhada, escutando as pessoas, escutando os territórios, escutando as comunidades, nós concebemos um plano, um projeto de plano diretor, a fim de que seja discutido na Câmara Municipal, ampliando em 38% as nossas áreas verdes, relativo ao último plano diretor, criando zonas de proteção aos nossos povos originários, ampliando as nossas zonas de proteção ao patrimônio cultural, ampliando zonas especiais de interesses sociais, enfim, um plano que, modéstia à parte, depois dessa ampla discussão que nós fizemos, eu acredito que tenha sido um dos melhores planos para a Fortaleza. Até porque é uma cidade que tem crescido muito, é uma cidade que tem avançado muito. E o grande desafio é implantar todas essas políticas com os recursos que nós temos. Então, nós necessitamos de parcerias, nós necessitamos de apoio. Já estamos tendo o apoio do governo federal, a quem a gente já agradece, mas precisamos de mais apoio. Nós temos quase 1.000 áreas, 1.000 assentamentos precários na nossa cidade. Nós temos aí quase 200 canais que nós temos na nossa cidade e que não eram limpos esses canais. E quando a gente chega no período chuvoso da cidade, a população mais vulnerável é a que mais sente. Como nós temos aí diversos exemplos. Mas eu posso também passar alguns dados para vocês. Nós, agora, no último mês agora de outubro, nós criamos a nossa política municipal de mudança do clima. Nós também, além do próprio plano diretor, que nós estamos aí, está para ser aprovado pela Câmara Municipal, nós também criamos aqui, expandimos os nossos corredores verdes e florestas urbanas, criamos 10 microparques em Fortaleza, estamos também criando parques em Fortaleza, fazendo com que a cidade seja uma cidade mais arborizada, uma cidade mais verde. Também estamos também inspirando outras cidades, sobretudo da região metropolitana, a alavancar uma colaboração em múltiplos níveis por meio do Mutirão contra o Calor Extremo. Esse Mutirão como exemplo prático da governança multinível. Nós também é importante, repito, ressaltar tudo aquilo que o apoio do governo federal. E nós temos uma expectativa de trabalhar em conjunto com outras cidades brasileiras e para ampliar os esforços de resiliência climática e adaptação do calor. Então, é nessa perspectiva que nós estamos trabalhando muito lá em Fortaleza, no sentido que a gente possa estar fazendo esse enfrentamento a essa crise climática, e, para isso, é importante que a gente tenha esse verdadeiro mutirão e o apoio de todas as organizações. Muito obrigado.
Mayor, thank you so much. We're nearly coming to the end of the panel, but I would just like to ask you all very quickly, and this is in 2 sentences, if you could, what would you like to implement in the next 12 months that would help you beat the heat? So a couple of sentences on that. Starting with you, please, Minister.
We would like to expand passive cooling and cold chain interventions under the Be Cool Somalia, and to protect lives, food system, livestock, and urban markets. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I would most like to change planning laws and building act conditions, because I think the problem is we're still building properties and homes that are not resilient to high temperature. It's a false economy. We're building problems for the future, and I think that although there's a housing crisis around the world, it's stupid to build houses that are not cool in the future.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Bem, nós queremos aproveitar a relevância desse evento para lançarmos o nosso observatório de riscos climáticos de Fortaleza. Um observatório que nós iremos monitorar o nosso clima já em algumas das regiões da cidade e também apresentar a nossa rede de sensores meteorológicos, que monitora, como eu disse agora há pouco, em tempo real, a sensação térmica e outros indicadores de calor nas áreas periféricas da cidade. A emergência climática exige respostas rápidas e estrategicamente localizadas.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and please join me in thanking all the panelists. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Great. Would you mind just pausing for a photo? Happy? All right, great. Okay, so on we go. Please can you now join me in welcoming the co-chair of the Global Cooling Pledge, His Excellency Adalberto Maluf.
Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you, distinguished guests, honors, mayors, secretaries, Ana Tony, our COP CEO. We, as Brazil, have been very proud to serve with the United Arab Emirates as co-chair of the Global Cooling Pledge, which was launched in COP28 by the Emirates as a host country. The pledge sets some collective goals and targets to reduce the cooling-related emissions by 68% in 2050, increase the global average efficiency of new air conditioners by 50%, and also to ensure sustainable cooling access for all, prioritizing the most vulnerable communities. We have 72 countries, more than 80 non-state actors that have endorsed the pledge, and a growing number of cooling for sustainable cooling. On the subnational commitments, we have been focused in 4 areas. The heat action plan, integrating heat resilience into disaster risk reduction, urban plans, and climate finance. Passive cooling, to expand nature-based solutions, heat resilient urban design and passive design in buildings. Public procurement, to leverage and promote efficiency and hybrid cooling technologies, and also to protect the most vulnerable, strengthening health systems, workplace, schools, communities, infrastructure. So Beat the Heat is all about recognizing the role of subnational governments. So right now, for us, will be a very important momentum to launch the implementation drive, which would provide a platform for countries, cities, and partners to mobilize. Ambitious, to reduce the targets that we all had, and have the Beat the Heat to serve as the implementation of the Global Cooling Pledge. And doing that, we will promote it. So I would like to ask for the slides, please. With slides, por favor. Yes. So now we have almost 200 cities, 185. Wow, it went up. It was 183 in the morning. I think 2 more cities joined it. So we have here the list, some of the major cities all over the world getting together, from Belém to Nairobi, Rio to Paris, Jakarta to Athens. And this network of cities will be supported by 70 partners, including development banks, city networks, civil society organizations, and the private sector. And together, they aim to turn the global targets into real improvement in people's life. In Brazil, Beat the Heat will be implemented through our Green Resilient Cities program, which aligns urban environment and climating policies to strengthen local adaptation capacities, to include piloting nature-based solutions, cooling projects, fostering city-city learning, integrating passive cooling into public procurement. So technical teams will be working together directly with the mayors and local partners to ensure that every city, regarding their size, can access the tools and the financing they need to implement these actions. So embedded in COP's presidency action agenda, Beat the Heat is advancing through greening the cities to beat the heat, the Solution Acceleration Plan, hosted by UNEP's Cooling, in partnership with Brazil Minister of Environment and Climate Change. And the plan provides this roadmap to ensure that nature-based solution and sustainable cooling are integrated into the climate and urban policy that could not only reduce energy demand, increase efficiency in the cooling sector, but prepare our cities for the future. These actions will be directly supported by the Global cooling pledge and contribute to mitigation. And the plan, Greening the Cities, Beat the Heat, is a roadmap for that solutions. So this shows that Beat the Heat can also be implemented with concrete actions. So here we have an example of many mayors from Brazil that are here, from Belém, São Paulo, Recife, Porto Alegre, Florianópolis, and all of them. And we are going to support them to map their urban heat islands and help to understand the cost benefit of deploying green infrastructure. Also training local officials in climate relation designs. So these efforts are all supported by the Cooling Coalition Toolkit and the Solutions Acceleration Plan. So here we have all the partners that have been supporting this process. The list, as you can see, has partners from all the different areas. So I'm positive that all together, these partners and this city, we can have transformed the Global Cooling Pledge not only in statements of intent, but a real commitment for implementation. Beat the Heat showed that this implementation can happen, city by city, partner by partner, and we thank all the countries, mayors, and institutions already leading the agenda. I would also like to invite everybody for the Cooling Ministerial we're going to have on the 18th at 4:30 here at the same room. And as co-chair of the pledge, Brazil and the United Arab Emirates invite all nations to join forces and make the cooling pillar of climate resiliency and equity. Together, the Global Cooling Pledge and Beat the Heat, we can ensure that cooling in the planet also means protecting lives and building resiliency in cities. Thank you.
Minister, thank you so much. And I have to say, this is such an impressive initiative in this partnership between commitment and implementation. I would really like to congratulate you. It's been remarkable. Minister, I think they're going to want you to go the other way. So, yeah, well, they want to take a picture of you. So, yeah, there you go. Right. Okay, so we're now going to move on to partnership for implementation. And I would like to invite the panelists for the next panel to please join me on stage, starting with Ana Claudia Rosbach, the Executive Director of UN Habitat. Nope, okay. Mark Watts, the CEO of C40. Hey, Mark, please join us. Elizabeth Yee, the Executive Vice President of the Rockefeller Foundation. Welcome, Liz. Stinchi van Veldhoven, the Vice President and Regional Director for Europe for WRI. Tasso Azevedo, the Executive Secretary for MAP Biomes. Thomas Freyland, the Global Head of Stakeholder Relations for Ramboll Group. And Jessica Hitt, the Associate Director of Adaptation and Resilience for the Climate Works Foundation. Please join me in welcoming the panelists. Yeah, you go here. Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Okay, we're going to run this like clockwork, and we'll get through it. So thank you, everybody. Really lovely to see you all, and looking forward to a great discussion. Mark, I'd love to start with you, if that's all right. So please grab a microphone. C40 recently launched the Cool Cities Accelerator in Rio and announced this as a contribution to the Beat the Heat Mutirão, this collective effort. How is this accelerator going to help the participating cities?
Well, we hope it's going to be sort of very practical support, but I've got to say first, it was so fantastic hearing the speakers before. I think this is such a good initiative, Beat the Heat. We were part of the Global Cooling Pledge also. It's sort of interesting. I spend a lot of my life talking to mayors. They're my bosses. And in the last 2 years, it's just become really noticeable when I do my normal shtick of how can we help you? What's the things where you need help from C40? And heat is just becoming the number one thing that gets repeated. It doesn't matter where in the world, almost, now. And I think that's also, we saw, a few of us were in Rio last week for the local leaders forum. There we asked mayors to come and not talk about what they were pledging to do in 10 or 20 years, but what they were going to do in the next year. I was just looking back through them now. Fully a third of all the pledges were focused on heat and beating the heat. So what we're trying to do with the Cool Cities Accelerator, it's a contribution to the Beat the Heat program. Liz has been supporting us on it to make it possible for us to have that resource. 33 of our cities, so what was it, 185? 33 of those are kind of part of this Cool Cities Accelerator. First and foremost, it's going to help all those cities have early warning systems so that citizens can be prepared when we've got foreknowledge of heat incidents coming. Secondly, and this is a real catch-all, but looking at the measures, the practical measures that can be taken to enable people to escape from the heat when it comes, whether that's sort of cooling shelters or it's changes to the cooling of their homes. But actually, probably the bigger one's going to be, and it was interesting it was where the Mayor of Adelaide ended in the previous round, is the longer term, is really looking at how we change building codes, we change planning regimes, so we're designing for, unfortunately, the very different, even worse temperatures we're going to see in the future. And that is to give comfort to future generations. And I think when you kind of look through what's currently on the list of those cities, it's very sort of varied. So sort of Phoenix, Arizona in the US, they topped 100 consecutive days of 40+ degree. It's impossible to imagine how you live in that. But actually, they have been learning from Freetown, Sierra Leone, a city that's been coping with higher temperatures for a long time, and they're just doing a huge amount of shading. It's not a big engineering measure. It's a shading measure. Rio in Brazil is copying from Paris now the idea of an extreme heat protocol that brings together all of the different emergency services, so they're much better coordinated in how they cope with heat. We're seeing quite a few cities now going where Athens, I think, first led, someone will correct me, and a chief heat officer, so that there's somebody whose job at the senior level of the city is to focus on heat and give that signal. Perhaps the biggest infrastructural change we're seeing, unsurprisingly, is in China, but Guangzhou, which is sort of almost redesigning the whole city to have much more green space, but learning from Seoul and now having 6 huge corridors going through the city, which will allow air to channel through and probably reduce temperatures 3 or 4 degrees as a result. So I think it's going to be a mix of things. I think we're really at the start of a journey. I'll quote from our co-chair, Mayor Akisoya. She said during the launch of this initiative as part of the Beat the Heat part of our summit last week, every tree planted, every home cooled, every life protected brings us closer to a more just and sustainable world. And I think that's the thing that brings it all together. This is about justice. It's about creating better quality of life for everybody, but also protecting us from, unfortunately, where we're going in a much hotter world.
Fantastic. Mark, thank you so much. So I think what's interesting there also, you talk about justice, you center that, but also about the necessity of collaboration in a changing world, right? That provides a different necessity of how we actually find our way forward. Liz, I know that you've done so much at the Rockefeller Foundation in terms of driving forward an understanding of risk at the city level, and you're now working closely to scale some of these cooling efforts around. Tell us a bit about that.
Happy to, and thank you so much for having me here. This is not my first COP, it's one of many, and I am just really inspired by the fact that we have subnational governments represented on the agenda and that we're focusing on real meaningful action, and in particular around heat, which I think we can all feel every time we exit this room. You mentioned chief heat officers. It was kind of a play on something that the foundation had done a long time ago. Mark, you'll remember 100 Resilient Cities. One of the key interventions of 100 Resilient Cities was this idea of a chief resilience officer because it helped cities coordinate across the different ministries and departments to be able to deliver action that communities needed. And this is the moment to kind of reenact that again and look at how chief heat officers, how chief planetary scientists can really drive the collaboration that needs to happen across the cities, because heat isn't owned by one department. In fact, there is a Duke University report, if anyone's interested, that shows how heat, when owned by one individual department, actually doesn't get you to the outcomes that you need. What you really need is the climate scientists working with the finance ministers, working with the health ministers, and on and on and on, because that is actually how we're going to build our communities and build our cities in particular to be able to withstand the heat, to make sure that communities are protected and people are able to live the lives that they deserve. I mean, one statistic from some of the work that we've been doing on this topic is that we're losing 1 life a minute to extreme heat. We're losing about 640 billion work hours, which translated is about $1.9 trillion in terms of lost economic opportunity. That's not a world that we can live in, even from a capitalist perspective, and it's certainly not, Johan Rockström said to me the other day, hey Liz, you know what, if we're at 2.5 degrees, Belém is uninhabitable. So we have to make a difference, we have to protect our cities, and it's not just, it's about adaptation and mitigation. We're not giving up on emissions, but we have to recognize this harsh reality that we're in, and we have to make progress, and it requires collaboration to be able to deliver on a future that we want our kids to be part of.
Liz, thank you so much. It's so inspiring actually to think, of course the mitigation is still a crucial part of this because there's a point at which many cities become unlivable, but there's actually a lot we can do in terms of data and design to make cities more livable and improve people's quality of life today. So Stenchi, that brings you in perfectly. WRI brings data, design, strategic thinking to these challenges as well as other types of collaboration and partnership. What are you doing? How are you leaning in to solve some of these challenges?
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks again, by the way, for convening us here. And I must say I was very impressed also by seeing the list of all the Brazilian cities involved. It's amazing, right? So congratulations to Brazil for all the efforts. I wanted one step back. Inger said when she gave her intervention, she said, this is where all the cool people hang. But I think that is because cooling is starting to become a privilege, right? And we need to be very, very much aware of this. This is such an equity agenda. And what I also loved was how Mrs. Lomax said, we need the social license. So how do we get the politicians the social license to take action and spend money on cooling cities? I'm a former politician myself, and of course you're always questioned. You always have many questions. So you need to be able to translate and to tell your people that you're spending the money effectively and efficiently. And for that, you need to answer certain questions, you need data and tools. So WRI has developed tools to help politicians answer some of those questions. So for example, you actually need to know what the size of the problem is to be able to tackle it effectively. So we've been working with 30 cities in 12 countries to find out what the data is that they need and then where to be able to get that data from, because there's lots of data gaps still that we have to fill. And I think one of the data gaps also that we need to fill is that we need to know better the effect of our action. And so we're working with the Wellcome Trust to connect actually the science of climate to the science of health, to know how can we take action effectively for people. Both, by the way, we map the health risks, but also opportunities for mitigation. And of course you want to map what you already have. So mapping what you have in your city, spatial planning, it was mentioned before, is absolutely key. So what do you have? We're doing that with the Jeff in the Urban Shift program. Spatial planning is absolutely key. And of course, you cannot do it all at once. So where does it make most of the difference? Where are you going to start? Where are the problems most important? And there, we're actually beginning of next year launching something new, which is the Cool Cities Lab. We're developing that with Google. And that's going to help identify specifically where in your city are the problems actually biggest, so you can prioritize your approach. And then, of course, final point, you need to develop the projects and get the finance. And so there with the Urban Heat Solutions Accelerator, and by the way, I think so many organizations have great tools. We have to make sure we somehow map all of them as well, so that cities know what's available for them to really drive that change. So we're a proud partner of Beat the Heat. We're looking forward to collaborating with all of you to drive this transition at speed and scale, because the people need it. If you ever try to live with 60 degrees, you know why you need it. And I want to thank everybody who's worked so hard on this already for so long.
Amazing, thank you. And I think that reference to data and tools there is so critical. I mean, that's what we're going to need. And I think, Tasso, what you're doing with map biomes is so interesting, because you're having high-quality maps that identify the real hotspots, that enable us to move into practical steps to move forward. So I'm really excited about what you're going to say, but I'm not going to ask you to say it yet, because Anna Tony is here, and I know from experience how busy people in this role are, and we're very privileged to have her here, but she needs to be somewhere else shortly, and the worst thing in the world would be if she left. So before we go to you, we're going to do two things. Anna Tony's going to speak to us, and we're going to have a photo, okay? And we're going to do this in a Mutirão spirit, where everyone collaborates and we do it really fast. First of all, please welcome the brilliant CEO of COP30, Anatoni.
Thank you, Tom. And I'm so sorry, I apologize for breaking the rhythm that was so interesting. So to have to run through a meeting with the substance chair. But I really wanted to be here, and I wanted to say thank you for UNEP and obviously for UN Habitat, for the partnership, for the Mutirão on Hit the Beat. When I saw the numbers that Adalberto just showed, 185 municipalities already joined this Mutirão, and with something that's really, really concrete. I mean, as Elizabeth just said, if we just get out of that door, we'll feel the heat. And I can tell you that we did it on purpose. We did it on purpose so that everybody knows why it's so important to join the Mutirão on Hit the Beat. Now that we have the meeting here, we'll ask people to put the air conditioning out, so you're not going to feel the heat anymore in the corridors. But jokes apart, I think we have gone a long way on this work. Adalberto mentioned we started in COP28 together with the Global Cooling Pledge. Then we went to COP29 with Brazil's chair on becoming the chair of the cooling pledge, and now the Beat the Heat. And I think the Beat the Heat is one of the easiest way to communicate what are we doing at the COP. People understand the heat, they feel in their bodies. Mothers, girls, you can see today is the Women's Caucus Day, so we should all remember also I see that, and I also have the right clothing colors here. But the Beat the Heat can communicate to people. And people can only continue supporting the multilateral agreements on climate change and the coalitions that are being built around that if they understand. And they are feeling the heat everywhere. I come from a city that's Rio, is so warm in the middle of the Amazon. You all here, you can feel the heat. We see the summers in Europe or in the US. The heat is going to hit everyone. So the Beat the Heat is an example of bringing everybody together with any specific goals, with capacity building, with concrete actions that mayors can do, private sector can do, technology can help so much. And if we are able to really multiply this Mutirão, we'll be getting out. Let us see, Adalberto, how many cities will be joining the Beat the Heat by the end of this COP. We trying to do the big Mutirão for NDCs. Today is 112. So let us put a target for Beat the Heat in terms of the city. And I again wanted to thank today is a really important day. We had some meetings with the CHAMP, C40 earlier on. The cities is the big news, I think, for COPs. The role of subnational governments and how they can multiply is really important. So we should not get out of this COP without making sure that the voice of mayors and governors are going to be really, really loud on the priorities. And I know that beating the heat is one of the biggest priorities. So again, thank you so much. Sorry for disturbing the panel, and I bring it back to you. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much, Anatoni. Now, I know you need to run, but first of all, can I please invite you onto the stage, together with all the panelists and all the other partners that are in the room. And we're going to do this with efficient Mutirão spirit. You in the middle, please, Anatoni. Okay, self-organization in an efficient way. I think over here. Anatoni, why don't we put you in the middle? Any other partners to beat the heat? Mayors who are here, please come up onto the stage. Yeah. Yep, please. Yeah. Okay, now's your moment if you want to be in the photo. Everyone say Mutirão. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. If I can invite the panelists to rejoin me on the stage, that would be great. And we were missing one panelist at the beginning. Ana Claudia Rochbach is now here. Ana Claudia, can I invite you to please join us on... Oh, I'm so sorry, yeah. Yeah, thank you. I know you have to go next.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I just want to say two things. The first one, it's very cool to be part of this coalition. Second thing, Anna said everything. And the third thing, you mentioned that briefly, Liz and Mark, two aspects that I really think are critical and really embedded in the work of UN Habitat, but also as a result of a trajectory that has been built by all of you. You know, this understanding of, the critical importance of connecting the dots and having a person that really makes sure that all sectors interact on the ground. So Mark spoke about urban planning and critical. The new urban agenda brings the principle of the social and ecological function of the land. And the shape of our cities is making a difference and will make a difference. This is one. And the second aspect is housing. And housing is critical at all levels. If we look at the built environment, how it needs to reinvent itself, and how we are at the risk of, losing or expanding the gap in terms of affordability in that sense, and just to pay attention to that, right? And the second is the ones living in very, very vulnerable conditions, in overcrowding situations, in occupied buildings, because they don't have access either to markets, or they live in situations where the fiscal capacity of the governments is limited. Also, the people living in informal settlements, they are suffering the most, right? So just to say that, colleagues and partners here, that we are part of the partnership. Our new strategic plan brings housing, the transformation of informal settlements at the center of the action of UN Habitat. And with that, I think we can work with you to really, really make sure that, we can beat the heat. We can be part of this Mutirão de Calor to address the challenges that we face. This morning, we were talking to the IPCC Cities Report authors, and we discussed about the interface of urban and climate change. And of course, heat is one critical interface that will also gain more data and more research, I believe, throughout this process of building the IPCC Cities report. And just to conclude, just one final thing. Mutirão, when I started my work, my professional life 40 years ago, I worked for the city of São Paulo. And there was no money for anything, also no money for housing. So the mayor, the first female mayor of the city of São Paulo, she needed to do something to address the housing issues. So she started a program called Mutirão. And this program was exactly that, bringing people together to build, because there was no resources at all. So in my head, Mutirão is housing. Okay, thank you very much. And apologies.
Thank you so much, Ana Claudia, and really appreciate you making the time to be here with us. Okay, back to regular programming. Tasso, thank you for your patience. Really looking forward to hearing what you can tell us about the mapping.
No, it's happy.
Yeah.
In Mapiomas and SEG, the two initiatives that I'm involved with, the first one, we actually calculate the greenhouse gas emissions for every municipality in Brazil, for all sources and etc. So it's 5,500 of them, so it's a lot of them. And in Mapiomas, what we do is to map every 30 by 30 square meter of the country, and telling the story how the land use has changed over time. So the idea is like you can get a 40-year story of how, for example, urbanization is growing, how forests is turning into agriculture and things like this. So this started in Brazil, and now it's present in all, it's a network of NGOs and universities and startups, and it's spread over all South America, plus Indonesia, India, Mexico, and DRC this year, starting also in Congo. Always with local organizations doing this process. So one of the interesting things that happens recently, 2 years ago, was that we start to work to check the data, look at the data inside the cities to understand like the heat, how hot is the heat islands and so on, and the relationship with the amount of green that you have on the spaces. And specifically, we addressed this in collaboration with Alana Foundation to look at the schools. So we took, as an experiment, we took the 28,000 schools on the capitals of Brazil, and then we measure how much green you have inside the schools and how much heat you have on those schools. So it was a little bit staggering that 4 of each of 10 schools, so like 40% of the schools has 0 green. Like it's practically a prison. You go there every day, stay locked in a cage or something like this. 0. And 6 out of 10 schools, like 60%, had an average 1 degree higher than the average temperature of the city. So basically schools are in heat places and have no green. But the most interesting is that when we cross this information with the results on the national exams for the students, the schools that have more green have better results. And the schools with less green has lower results. The same thing for heat. So, so based on this idea, there's 2 journeys that are happening, and that has a strong relationship here. So we decide to map the heat on 30-meter resolution for every city in Brazil. And then, so we start in Brazil and then after to the other countries to understand where are those heat areas. And also, because we have all the things on green, to match one to the other. And the second thing was this idea that we are launching with other partners to promote 20% of green on every school as a starting point. So every school, 20% of green. How to make this, how to work with the majors and other places. And then we can think about this as how to have 20% of green on any neighborhood, how to have 20% of green on any public space and things like this, to kind of act on large scale, on a simple way with a simple indicator, how we can have like cooler cities as like this school group.
Amazing, thank you so much. It's so fascinating. I mean, it's sort of heartbreaking to hear some of the statistics about schools, but of course, once you have the mapping technology, you can then identify that and form a strategy. So it's so inspiring to hear what you're doing. Thomas, I'd love to come to you. I mean, there's a lot of strategies and plans that we've heard about from different partners, but in the end, it's design and engineering firms that often engage to actually change things on the ground. How are you going to be leaning into this initiative and supporting the partners?
Thank you. We have a lot in common. There are a lot of people I work with who would love to speak with you. First of all, thank you to UNEP and to Brazil for this convening. And also, crucially, for including businesses in the effort to combat extreme heat. I represent a company called Ramboll, which is a global architecture, engineering, and consulting firm. We have 18,000 experts around the world that work every day to create sustainable societies and cities where people and nature can flourish. We work in cities every single day, in and with cities. We have created climate adaptation plans and mitigation plans for many of the cities in Mark's network. We have built critical infrastructure projects, vast ones. We just did a massive project in Singapore, the north-south. We do really large projects at scale. And deadly urban heat is a topic that we come across every single day. It is something that many of my colleagues and I care deeply about addressing, but also about finally solving, because as with many of the challenges being discussed at COP, the money is there, the solutions are there, we are all ready, It just needs to happen. In urban planning at Ramboll, we have helped design urban areas where the temperature has been lowered by as much as 10 degrees Celsius based on the nature-based solutions that we have implemented. Our buildings engineers and architects have developed innovative cooling structures. We heard earlier of the old nature-based solutions that we can bring forward again. These structures aim to lower emissions, but also to create livable spaces where people can thrive in a healthy way. Our goal, as many of the people here today, is to create a net zero world, but as we've said many times here today, that means we need all hands on deck. And just to say, I'm thrilled that this is the COP of implementation because we want to be the implementation partner. Again, it's wonderful to see that there are think tanks, there are businesses, there are mayors, there are governors. That is what we need. The Ramboll Group is owned by a foundation called the Ramboll Foundation. They have provided funding for us to create a new digital tool that will enable cities to simultaneously calculate and address the impacts of flooding and urban heat through nature-based solutions, as well as the effects of the mitigation actions that we propose. This tool can be used to analyze impacts in both data-rich European and North American cities, but crucially also in emerging economies where data about urban areas is often scarce. And in collaboration with C40 cities, with the City of Copenhagen, and with the City of New York and other partners, we will start to roll out a series of training workshops in select cities that are facing severe climate impacts. And we plan to expand that rollout as the tool develops. And we'll share a significant number of the case studies that we have from projects around the world, in the Middle East, in Asia, in North America, et cetera, to also to work with city officials, not just to inspire, but also to co-create as we face urban heat. We have had a very fruitful collaboration with UNEP and ILO and UNICEF in the past year on the Green Jobs for Youth Pact. We were proud to be the first corporate signatory to the Green Jobs for Youth Pact. And in this commitment to beat the heat, we will also make sure that we include and represent youth in the skills-based workshops that we will roll out for the tool to make sure that we can encourage careers that really are rooted in nature-based solutions to fight climate change. So thank you again for your leadership and for letting us participate.
Thank you so much. And great to hear about the tools you're developing. Yeah, please. Yeah. So, Jessica, I'd love to come to you. I mean, you're focusing on adaptation and resilience. Climate Works has been such a big leader of all of this space in support for UNEP and for others. How are you going to continue to lean in, and what's next for this partnership?
Yeah, thank you. It's exciting to join the session today and all these incredible speakers. I think what really gets me excited is the focus on implementation, really moving beyond words and to plans and actions that most specifically impact those most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And that's really what we've kind of centered our work around. As noted, Climate Works has been a leading, longstanding partner of the Cool Coalition through my sister program at Climate Works, the Clean Cooling Collaborative. We work hand in hand. Because as Liz noted earlier, integrated solutions that cut emissions, expand access to cooling solutions, and build deep resilience is the way forward to beat the heat. This August, we launched the Adaptation and Resilience Fund with a number of partners, including the Rockefeller Foundation, Loudis Foundation, Quadrature Foundation, and the Howden Foundation. And together, really, our focus is actually on getting resources for implementation and local solutions. In September, we issued the first open call for proposals on extreme heat in urban areas, and the focus was on innovative finance, institutional capacity, and field building, really lifting up civil society leadership, and ensuring that those kind of living and working in the hottest, most vulnerable spaces were both leading and benefiting from the solutions. This opportunity represents about $10 million in funding, and we hope to announce selected grantees in early 2026. As mentioned earlier, we also worked with C40 and the Cool Cities Accelerator, and really looking forward, Climate Works Adaptation Program will continue to advance the goals of Beat the Heat by investing in implementation that's really focusing on innovation, city capacity, aligning technical assistance, finance, and local action to create real change where it matters most with communities on the front lines. Also, just a note, I'm proud to share that ClimateWorks launched a report today showing that foundation funding for adaptation and resilience has more than doubled since 2021, reaching $870 million in 2024. And during that same period, we saw a 55% increase in foundations that were funding on adaptation. While that is growing and encouraging, it's safe to say that all sectors and all geographies remain drastically underfunded, and so there's more to do. And we look forward to continuing to partner and work and drive implementation forward.
Thank you so much. And it's so encouraging to hear that finally we are seeing more capital flow towards adaptation that's been needed for such a long time. So thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you all for joining us. This has been the launch of the Beat the Heat with incredible momentum, designed for partnership for implementation. I'm just going to mention a few organizations who are part of this that haven't been part of the panels: SE for All, EBRD, Lloyd Pace, IFRC, ARUP, Global Covenant of Mayors, IDB, ICLEI, DICAN, Alana, Space Cool. There's many of them. You're going to hear a lot more about this initiative. There's a lot of work to do. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to all the panelists. And I'd like the record to show we're only 5 minutes late. Yeah.